China unleashes targeted tariffs, export controls, and a WTO complaint as the extra 10% in U.S. levies on Chinese imports goes into force. There's a 30-day reprieve for Washington's other major trade partners. Canada and Mexico promising in 11th-hour phone calls troops and funding to stiffen security on the border. To look more closely at both levies and counter-levies and an unfolding trade war between the US and China, Tommy Wu joins us live from Singapore. He's a senior China economist at Commerzbank. Well, thanks for joining us, Mr. Wu, this evening. So far, on this bulletin, we've heard from guests, analysts as well. The comment is that the response from China to that extra 10% levies from the United States is measured, restrained, calibrated. By measured, one definition of that would be it's saying we could do far more, but we are choosing at this point to stay our hand. How would you define what we are calling a measured response so far from Beijing to these extra 10% in levies from the United States?
Yeah, I think now in terms of just talking about the tariffs that's being raised, number one, they were very much targeted into selected goods such as coal, LNG, large cars, etc., etc. And then, I mean, China doesn't just import these products from the US. There is a wide range of products and that China can actually target. And also, actually, these products, at least according to my estimation, they account for about 13% of China's imports from the US, which is actually much smaller than the 2/3 that were covered during the 2018-19 episode during Trump's first presidency. And what it means today with the current goods being targeted, they only account for about 1% of China's total imports, which means that it's not going to create a lot of trouble for China's economy either. The other thing is it has a lot of tools in its arsenal compared to, say, 4 years ago. And so the things that have been imposed today, a lot of them could be symbolic, including how they targeted a major US tech company, which actually doesn't have a lot of operations in China.
So, Mr. Wu, we're not going to be knowing what is on Xi Jinping's mind when he has that phone call with President Donald Trump from the United States. But looking at these moves, if we can read them, this would suggest that China is willing to give some ground for both sides to avert a very damaging trade war.
Yes, indeed, because I think from China's perspective, at the moment, it actually wants to focus on its domestic problems. And for the US, it's probably, at least at the current moment, probably it just wants to deal with the drug control problem for now. Well, perhaps the US may want China to import more US products later on. We'll see that after the review of the so-called Phase 1 trade deal that will be done in April. But it is still early days, so anything can happen. But at least from the Chinese perspective, as I said earlier, their focus, there's just a lot of structural issues that China has to deal with, including the real estate problems, the local government debt issues, and the generally soft or weak investment or basically the private sector confidence. So there are a lot of problems that China wants to deal with domestically first, rather than having a complex external problem to handle.
Would China be looking at the deals that the US has reached with Mexico and Canada? Of course, these are just 30-day reprieves, but they are deals. Is there a parallel move that China can make, which Canada and Mexico have clearly taken, so that it reaches at least some kind of reprieve as well with Washington? What kind of deal might that be?
I think it's possible, as you said. Basically, the U.S., Canada, Mexico situation turned around within 12 hours. If President Trump is going to talk to President Xi Jinping, in the near term, then it's possible for them to make some kind of deal before the February 10th deadline. perhaps maybe a repeat of delaying the tariffs, or maybe they will come up with some kind of deal from the importing of more U.S. goods, or the technology front. So and I think it's still early days, and anything is possible.
You could argue, and you have argued, that in fact, between Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi, there might be more ground to give than Mr. Xi and Mr. Trump's predecessor, Joe Biden, given that the competition that was laid out coherently by Mr. Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, small yards, high fences, and the conjoining of economic along with security, so strategic security and economics became one, pretty much conflated during the Biden administration. But with Mr. Trump, they might be set apart, therefore giving both sides more room to reach some kind of deal acceptable to both the US as well as China.
Yeah, I think because basically the former President Biden or the Biden administration was more principle based. And so it would be much harder for China to come up with some kind of deal with a Biden administration, because Biden was going against China's technology and stopping China from advancing too quickly. Whereas for Trump, I would say that he's more transactional, and he's more likely using tariffs as a bargaining chip for negotiation, and he's more interested in supporting U.S. businesses, creating jobs for Americans, and probably less so in seeing China as a competitor or rivalry, at least perhaps compared to Biden. So there is a silver lining in that sense.
So what might have been zero sum under the Biden administration for Mr. Trump is no longer zero sum, and this is a final question. So there could be some room that both might be able to give.
Yeah, I think at this, as I said, this is early days, and probably both sides are using tariffs and other measures, raising them for now as bargaining chips for later rounds of negotiations. So China wants to, both sides, I would say that both sides actually want to negotiate and probably come up with some kind of a deal. For the U.S., perhaps more imports from China importing more U.S. products, or Chinese companies investing more in the U.S., etc. And whereas for China, I think it will be happy if basically if they can come up with some kind of deal, and then China can actually focus on its domestic problems.
Tommy Wu, thanks so much. Senior China economist at Commerzbank in Singapore, looking ahead at what we might expect in the days ahead if, in case a deal is reached before those levies go into effect on U.S. imports into China on the 10th of February.